You remember what it felt like when summer had no end. Not metaphorically, literally. You'd wake up, and the whole day would stretch out in front of you like a road with no sign telling you where to stop. No notifications, no group chats, no one waiting on a reply. Just the sound of a screen door slamming behind you and the particular heat of a July sidewalk under your shoes. You weren't bored in the way people use that word now. You were free times in a way that doesn't quite translate anymore. And here's the strange part, you didn't know it then. You didn't look around and think, this is precious, remember this. You just lived it, completely. And now, decades later, something in you keeps reaching for a world that no longer exists. A world that, in many ways, quietly disappeared while everyone was busy moving forward. That feeling isn't weakness. It isn't nostalgia in the shallow sense. It's your nervous system grieving something real. You are not broken for feeling out of place in the modern world. You are not dramatic for finding the pace of today exhausting. And you are not stuck in the past simply because part of your brain still lives there. Here's what's actually happening. You grew up in a neurologically different environment. The world you were wired in, the textures, the rhythms, the social structures of it shaped your brain during its most sensitive window of development. And that world is gone, not evolved, not updated, gone. What you're feeling isn't just sentiment. It's your brain recognizing a mismatch between the environment it was built for and the one it's being asked to operate in now. That distinction matters because it means this isn't about being too sensitive or too nostalgic or too resistant to change. It means your experience is real, your disorientation is real, and it makes complete sense. Let's start with something small, the bike. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s in America, there's a good chance that bike wasn't just transportation. It was freedom with handlebars. You'd ride until the streetlights came on, and that wasn't a poetic thing someone said once. That was an actual agreement, an understood curfew written nowhere and followed everywhere. No GPS, no check-ins, no parent tracking your location from a phone in the kitchen. You just went, and then you came back. Psychologically, what that gave you was something developmental scientists now call time's autonomous exploration. The ability to navigate uncertainty without immediate adult intervention. Your brain learned, slowly and through real experience, that the world was manageable, that you could get lost and find your way, that skinning your knee was survivable, that boredom could be solved by times you, not by a screen offering 10,000 alternatives in under a second. That kind of learning doesn't happen in supervised, optimized, constantly stimulated environments. It requires something the modern world has nearly eliminated: unstructured time with low stakes and no audience. You had that, and it built something in you that runs deep. Then there were the places. The arcade, the mall on a Friday night with no particular plan. The video store where you'd walk every aisle and hold the box of a movie you'd never heard of, reading the back 3 times trying to decide. These weren't just locations. They were times, third places, time spaces that existed between home and school, where you could simply be present without purpose, where you could run into someone, or be bored together with strangers, or feel the particular buzz of a room full of people, all choosing to be in the same physical space at the same time. Social bonding worked differently then. It was face-to-face by default, not because you were more evolved or more social, but because the infrastructure of connection was physical. If you wanted to talk to your friend, you knocked on their door. If they weren't home, you tried again later or gave up and sat on the curb thinking about it. There was lag times built into human connection, and that lag had psychological value that nobody knew to protect. Dopamine, the brain's reward and anticipation chemical, functions differently under scarcity. When you had to wait a week for the next episode of your favorite show, the anticipation itself became part of the pleasure. When you had to rewind a VHS before someone else could watch it, you were engaging with time in a way that made experiences feel weighty, memorable, yours. Today's world has removed almost all of that friction, and in doing so, it has changed what the brain has to work with. Everything arrives instantly. Every answer, every episode, every social validation. The brain adapts, as it always does, but adaptation has a cost. But here's the part nobody tells you. The loss you feel isn't just about the past. It's about identity. The world you grew up in wasn't just a backdrop. It was the material your sense of self was built from. Saturday morning cartoons weren't just entertainment. They were a shared cultural language that connected you to every other kid who watched the same thing. Landline phone calls with their tangled cords and their complete lack of privacy were social rituals that taught you timing, patience, and the art of talking to someone's parent first. Even the static on a channel that had gone off air at midnight was a sensory experience that meant something. It meant times it's late, and the world has gone quiet, and you should too. These experiences weren't just pleasant. They were times formative. They told you who you were in relation to others. And when that entire framework disappears, when the cultural ground beneath your feet shifts completely, something in the psyche scrambles to find footing. This is why 80s and 90s kids don't just feel nostalgic in a passive, wistful way. They often feel a quiet, unnamed grief, a sense that something was lost that cannot be retrieved or replicated. Not because they're unwilling to adapt, but because the thing that was lost isn't available in any updated format. You can stream every movie from your childhood, you can find every song, but you cannot recreate the experience of being a child in a slower world. Because that experience was made of times, unlike content, doesn't stream. As you've gotten older, this feeling has likely shifted shape. In your 20s, it might have felt like restlessness, a vague sense that modern life was moving too fast and you were always slightly behind. In your 30s, it might have crystallized into something more specific, a fatigue with constant digital input, a craving for analog simplicity, a preference for small gatherings over large ones, a difficulty explaining to people younger than you why you sometimes just want to sit somewhere quiet with nothing happening. This is not regression. This is not you failing to evolve. What's happening is that your brain is doing exactly what brains do. It's seeking the conditions under which it felt most regulated, most at home, most itself. The nervous system, when overwhelmed, reaches toward its earliest experiences of safety. And for you, safety often had a particular texture. It felt like an afternoon with no agenda, a phone ringing in a kitchen, a song you heard through a car window, the smell of a video store, the weight of a controller in your hands before games became jobs. These aren't just memories. They are time's anchors. And in a world that moves this fast, your nervous system is not wrong to reach for them. Think of it this way. Your brain is not malfunctioning when it craves slowness in a world of speed. It is doing what a person does when they come home from somewhere overwhelming. It's looking for a familiar room to breathe in. A place where the rules are known, where the pace is livable, where presence doesn't require performance. The modern world asks something extraordinary of the human nervous system. It asks you to be constantly available, constantly stimulated, constantly aware of an almost infinite landscape of other people's lives. It places your identity in a stream of comparison that never pauses. It makes loneliness possible in rooms full of people and connection possible in rooms completely empty. You didn't grow up in that world. You grew up in one where you could disappear for a whole afternoon and no one could reach you. And that was not only acceptable, it was normal. Expected. The building block of a life. What you carry from that world isn't just memory. It's a way of being. A neurological baseline that still knows what quiet feels like. Still recognizes the difference between genuine connection and performed connection. Still values the earned satisfaction of waiting for something that finally arrives. That is not a burden. That is a gift even when it aches. You didn't just grow up. You grew up in a disappearing world. A world where communities were smaller and therefore tighter. Where parents were less surveilled and therefore less anxious. where childhood moved at the pace of actual childhood, not at the pace of content or productivity or optimization, where being a kid meant being genuinely unreachable for hours at a time, and that was not a problem to be solved. That world is not coming back, and some part of you has always known that, even when you couldn't name it. But knowing it, really knowing it, not as a complaint but as a truth, changes something. It transforms the feeling from inadequacy into clarity. You are not struggling to keep up because you lack something. You are navigating a genuine discontinuity between the world that built you and the world you're living in. That is not a personal failure. It is a historical reality, a neurological fact, a very human experience of being shaped by one time and asked to live fully in another. You carry something in you that was made in quieter days, a capacity for stillness, a memory of what it felt like to be fully present without documentation, a deep, cellular understanding that some of the best things in life, summer evenings, a good song through someone else's window, a conversation that went on past dark, were never meant to be captured or repeated or turned into content. They were just meant to be felt. And you felt them fully in a world that gave you the space to do exactly that. That's not something to grieve without end. That's something to carry forward quietly as its own kind of knowing.